Hello and welcome to the Red Tunic podcast. Today I'm joined by Tom Beardsmore, co-founder of Coatsink, a company that both develops and publishes games such as Get Packed, Cake Bash, and the recent released Fogs. Tom, how are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you.
Well,
How about yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Thanks for asking. Glad to hear that you're doing all right. So why don't you tell us a little bit about Coatsink just so we can get a little bit of information about it before going forward?
Sure. So Coatsink started as a two-person team, myself and my long-term best friend Paul Crabb. We'd grown up playing games together as so many did during the 90s, 2000s, and beyond. We always joked about making our own video games one day. Back when we were playing Metal Gear Solid, Final Fantasy VII, Baldur's Gate 2, those kind of games we were really obsessed with. And came to our university days. Paul did video game development, specifically visualization. So he's a graphics programmer and then did design. And I actually did creative writing and screenwriting. But ended up in a job in games anyway, working at Blizzard, and then that takes us through to 2009, late 2009, where Paul and I talked about starting our own games company, and this was during the first era, the surge in iOS game development, which was kind of an easy entry point, cheap, relatively technically easy entry point for game developers at the time, and the rest is history. I can go into more detail.
No, yeah, that's great. Gives a good kind of foundation for where you guys are from, and I think around that time as well. A lot, like you said, it was a good entry point into iOS development and that kind of stuff, and a lot of people did jump in on that time. Did you notice when you were doing that? Were there a lot of people doing what you were doing? Was there like kind of like a fight for the market share? Wrong word probably, so to say, but was it easy for you guys to come out with your own brand of what you were aiming to do?
I would say yeah, but there's a lot of people doing it at that time. It was kind of the early days of indie development in general.
Mm-hmm.
Or at least the current generation of indie development. So the Yeah, it was definitely hard to stand out. I think it
Mm-hmm.
always is as a game studio or as any creative studio, I guess. Whether it's you know, any kind of creative industry, it's difficult to stand out. But particularly in games, we're I remember the early days when we were working on our first game, which was an iOS game called Pinch. It was a simple puzzle game where I ended up somehow being in charge of the art and Paul was in charge of the programming, even though neither of us particularly good at either of those things. Our aim was to be creatively independent. We
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be product based. So that was the whole plan from the beginning. We didn't want to be a work for hire company. We don't mind bootstrapping with work for hire. We still do it now, but these days we're able to pick our projects a little bit better. But yes, it took a long time to be recognized, especially with such a stupid name as like Coatsink, because it started as a little bit of a joke name, and now we're stuck with it.
Yeah, not to speak ill of your name. That's not where the direction I'm going with this. But yeah, I can definitely understand when you kind of paint yourself into a corner with a name. When it comes to then, if you do want to rebrand, it takes a lot of effort to do that. So like I understand where you're coming from with that, and I imagine a lot of people can also feel that way. For example, all the people that were wanting PlayStation to allow them to change their PSN names for years and years probably have a very similar feeling.
Yeah.
However, I'm not going to lie, Coatsink is a perfectly fine name to have as a studio name. Nothing really embarrassing there, so not the same.
Could
Like
be
I said, I
worse.
imagine. Yes, yeah. It could be, the PlayStation people, they probably have a much more nightmarish reason for why they want to change theirs at this point in time. And there is something I really did want to touch on real quick, as well, that you mentioned that, yeah, around that time would have been the time that indie games were made more accessible to everyone, really, because Steam at that point was starting to kind of open up. But with like Google Play and the iStore, that was a whole new world. So that's, being able to get through that, survive it, and then build on it. That's, that says a lot for the products that you were delivering, because a lot of companies, from what I've seen at least, there was a good amount that just didn't make it past that phase. So that's, that says a lot to the products the games you're making, and what you're continuing to do, which is always fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, a lot of it. I always say like keys to building this successful business. Yeah, having that kind of unique creative approach, surrounding yourself with the right people is critical.
Hmm.
Like talented, hardworking, egoless people. You have to be surrounded with. Um, and also just honestly a lot of perseverance. You have to be really willing to uh, just grind. Like it takes a long time to get noticed one way or another for most people,
Hmm.
um, for most companies. And I think the benefits of it taking a longer time mean that when it does happen, you're more ready for it as well, both skills wise and in terms of how you'll cope with that found success, I guess. Um, but yeah, I mean, going back to the early games, that game I mentioned, Pinch, did not make us any money, but it did receive very good critical reviews,
Hmm.
which we found over the years there's a big difference between critical success and commercial success. Um, so yeah, what that meant was that we got offered a lot of funding and work for hire after that game, which I say a lot. We're talking like tens of thousands of dollars,
Hmm.
but slowly over the years that became hundreds of thousands and then millions of investment. So it's a good start to start with those few tens of thousands, certainly.
Yeah, yeah, like definitely, because as they say, and this is a horrible analogy, but you really do have to learn to walk before you can run, right? So
Yeah,
like getting getting that to that position, and kind of what you also touched on for other things in the the creative sense, or just the producing sense in general. um it's the steps along the way, because you're not gonna, rarely at least, do you kind of step out into um huge commercial and critical success, right? um and never, rarely does that speak ill to you as a company, or you as a person, or what have you. That's just the nature of the business, right? So
yeah,
definitely can understand. I think a lot of people can probably appreciate being told, it's okay to take those little steps, or those little steps are going to be what eventually lead to something.
yeah, exactly. And there are people who do it the other way, like Bone Loaf, Gang Beasts. Obviously,
Hmm.
Coatsink is involved heavily in Gang Beasts as a development partner, and that is a great example of an overnight success from nothing. Those
Yes.
guys, yeah, and those guys have a lot of life experience, but games industry, this was their first. Well, no, they did have some cool little prototypes and games beforehand, but this was their first major release, and
Hmm.
immediately went stratospheric, of course.
Yes.
Um,
Almost instantly went stratospheric, because
yeah,
when I spoke to Michael from Bone Loaf,
yeah,
he had mentioned when they initially, I think it was Giant Bomb, he said, did the report, and
mm,
that's when the light bulb went on for me, is because I originally tried it because it was making the rounds in those
in those circles.
game
Yeah,
journalism stuff. So yeah, some people do kind of just fall into great luck with that, and that's always great to hear as well, for cool and great games.
yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think those guys are exceptionally talented. Very creative thinkers. Um, come up with genius simple ideas, the type of ideas that you always wish you thought of, but you know, you realize eventually. Well, certainly I am not capable of thinking up those in
And yeah,
gameplay.
like I definitely understand what you mean there is you know, because like I said to them, I don't want to spend too much time talking about them because you know I want to talk about what you guys do and you're here. But one of the
Yeah,
things I mentioned to Michael was the physics of the characters were, to my knowledge, the one of, or if not the first that did that. And I thought just the weight and the way the characters worked was genius. So you
yeah,
know, yeah, like they just that was a I think that was a perfect storm of just a great little prototype that just sort of took off, which is you know always great to
exactly.
have.
Yeah, exactly. You know, and it
So
was. Yeah, sorry, go on.
no, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I was just going to say, yeah, it's the crazy thing about it is it just such long legs as well. You know, it had been very successful before we started working on it, but then after we released the console and the network multiplayer version, it jumped another step, and it seems to, you know, not be slowing down. Um, it seems like it's got real legs on it, that game, which is fantastic. And I think testament to all the effort that everybody involved has put in.
Yeah, and definitely, I definitely hope to hope it continues to you know
Oh, me too.
to keep
Yeah,
those legs.
yeah,
Now, there is something you mentioned earlier. That was, you know, you and your co-founder Paul. You played a lot of games when you were younger. So I'm gonna. This is kind of a two-parter, I guess. Um, did you have a lot? Like, what was your favorite game as a child? Like that you would have played, you know, yourself. And you know, what made that game your favorite game?
yeah. Oh, I don't want to miss anything, but thinking back, some of the key moments would be, uh, yeah, early Mario's on NES and
Hmm.
Super NES, and Sonic on Mega Drive. I believe it was called something else to you, but the Sega Mega Drive.
Um,
Yeah,
the Genesis. Yeah, it
Genesis.
was the
Yeah, yeah,
Genesis.
Genesis. Yeah, and Streets of Rage on the Mega Drive Genesis. Streets of Rage 2, and jump to. I'm going to jump around, but I don't want to miss any that were really key. Um, Command and Conquer's first big PC game, Red
Hmm.
Alert, um, and then Half Life, the first Half Life, Quake as well, a little bit, and then what really made me realize that games could be more than just gameplay was, I mentioned it earlier, was Baldur's Gate 2.
Hmm.
Yeah, I actually jumped straight to Baldur's Gate 2 before I played Baldur's Gate 1. And I remember playing that game and being just amazed by the storytelling and how immersed I felt in the world as a result. And I'm, you know, my passion's always been writing, storytelling. So that was like that's become my thing from then on. You know, I love
Hmm.
RPGs. But you know, other big ones would be Final Fantasy VII, Metal Gear Solid. Um, yeah, those as a kid, those were the big ones that spring to mind.
Hmm. Now it's kind of interesting that you skipped Baldur's Gate 1, or at least initially skipped
Yeah,
Baldur's Gate 1. However, I do believe there were some good system changes between the two, so that must have been a little bit of a shock going backwards when you did get to it, because I know um you know nothing bad against Baldur's Gate 1. I you know I played it. It's a you know I think it's a great game. I look forward to the third one when it gets out of early access and you know all of that surrounding it. But Baldur's Gate 1 was kind of rough only because of the Dungeons and Dragons advanced system it was using. It was always
mm,
I always felt and still do that it was hard to kind of wrap your head around some of the mechanics that were updated and aged out. So power to you for going backwards on that
yeah,
setup.
yeah. I think the main reason I did that was simply an age thing because
Hmm.
I think Baldur's Gate 2 came out in '98, and I'll have been 12 or 13 at the time. And I think that was just a like I think Baldur's Gate 1 was, or was it 2000? I can't remember actually now. Baldur's Gate 1 and 2. But I believe Baldur's Gate 1 was at least 2 or 3 years before that, which just kind of meant that I was probably too young to enjoy it, or to try it out when I was that age. Whereas Baldur's Gate 2 fit perfectly. That was but yes, I mean, certainly even in Baldur's Gate 2, there was a steep learning curve for me. I was very used to much simpler games, much simpler forms of gameplay, certainly. But I remember just once I got to grips with it, I was just completely enthralled with it. I think I must have played the whole thing, however long that game is. I can't remember now. It must be 50 to 100 hours if you're going to do everything.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I must have played it 4 times, something like that, through. So yeah, I was
And,
pretty obsessed.
and that takes some pretty decent dedication. Um, I haven't got much time logged in them just because I try and play them co-op, and usually, you as you may or may not know, the when the host dies, the whole game drops. So
Right.
it can be a little difficult to keep that momentum going
Yeah.
um, in those scenarios, only because that's a very big halt
Yeah.
to what you're working at that point.
Yeah. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. I've actually been playing Divinity 2.
Hmm.
No, I'm sorry. No, Divinity Original Sin. Taken me a long time to get through it because I'm playing it co-op with Paul,
Hmm.
the co-founder. And yeah, we love it. I don't know how. I think with Baldur's Gate 3, honestly, I might play that solo because I'm. The Baldur's Gate games are about story immersion for me,
Hmm.
and I would like a lot of my RPGs. I find that co-op is really fun, but perhaps takes away from story immersion in games like that sometimes. Um, but that's probably just nostalgia taking control, and this self-taught belief that I need to play them solo rather than anything real.
I can definitely see where you're coming from with that, um, especially with some games like a Divinity Original Sin 1 versus 2, for example. 1 tried to take itself a little more seriously than 2 did. Um, so it's definitely there can be some instances where uh, opposing play styles, I'll use that term, can kind of contradict with what you're trying to do or what you're trying to get out of it.
Yeah,
So yeah, I can definitely understand where you would want to like where you the approach for Baldur's Gate 3 like that. However, from what I've heard, a little it's presented a little differently than Divinity's Original Sin 1 and 2. So, it might be something that you can still get the same amount of immersion and enjoyment out of while enjoying it as a co-op game. I'm not trying to, tell you how to play it, just based on from what I've heard, if you enjoy the communal aspect of it as well, that one actually might kind of meet in the middle in a nice way for you.
yeah,
Now, you did give me a lot of games that you enjoyed through your youth and such.
yeah.
Um, Now, I don't want to focus on negative aspects of things, but are there any games from your childhood that you can remember enjoying, but you kind of went back to, several years later into your adulthood that kind of just didn't hold up to the way your memory propped them up?
Um, Nothing springs to mind, but that might just be because I try not to revisit them. Um, because I think like immediately the advances in certainly visuals will will make them naturally will off-putting going
Hmm.
backwards. I think I did go at one point. I went back and tried to play Vampire the Masquerade. The one that uses the Source engine. I forget the name of it. I have it on my Steam list here. Um,
I think it might have been Masquerade.
yeah, was it just the Masquerade? Yeah. Anyway, that one I went to try and play Bloodlines. That's what it was called. Yeah, I
Right,
went to
right.
try and play that again. Um, and was immediately put off by it. I was like, this is not as beautiful as I remember it, so I stopped playing because the memory was more important to me. I didn't want to wreck that. I think it's unless a game has been updated visually, it's
Hmm.
maybe not worth doing it. I think you've got plenty of games to play now. Certainly, that's my take on it anyway. I know a lot of people like going back and playing the classics. I think Baldur's Gate, obviously they've made enhanced editions of the Baldur's Gate
Hmm.
franchise. I would definitely like to go back and play them when I get time. I do have them all. I just haven't had time to play them.
Hmm. And that's a real valid approach to it because in today's world where you got Humble Bundle or you have Steam sales or just games getting easier to find as they age and being cheaper. Um, you kind of do have a lot of games. You can get inundated with them, so it's a completely understandable approach to not want to go back, whether it's because you have too many on your plate as it is, or as you said, not wanting to risk that memory because yeah, sometimes you play a game and it holds a special place in your heart or your mind only because of how you enjoyed it at that moment. And as unfortunate as it is, sometimes you can't go back to that moment to recreate those feelings. So I guess protecting it, it's is a perfectly safe and valid thing to want to do, which I've never actually thought about, and that's probably a good reason to maybe not look at some of the older games again when there's always some in front. Don't want to turn what once was a favorite game into a game you don't enjoy, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Now,
exactly.
now with the topic of current games and the how they stay hold up now, what kind of games are your current go tos? The current ones you are your favorites that you enjoy.
Um, yeah. So I have a family. I have three kids and a wife and stuff, and so
Hmm.
between that and work, I have to generally have to focus my efforts in gaming. Um, and what'll typically happen is I'll pick a game that ends up lasting me like a year,
Hmm.
embarrassingly. So um, let me think. So this year I spent a lot of time playing The Last of Us 2.
Hmm.
I think that took me. It's not a huge game. I think it took me 40-ish hours, maybe 45. And I played that for maybe 3 months.
Hmm.
Um, Love that game. Thought it was incredible. Um, I Yeah, I've got Spider-Man Miles Morales on the go at the moment. Last year's big game was Red Dead for me was Red Dead Redemption 2. Uh, Adored that game. Absolutely adored it as well. Yes, I've kind of become this AAA guy. I do play a lot of things for shorter periods of time in
Hmm.
between. A lot of multiplayer games with my friends, like stuff like Divinity that I mentioned. I also played a bunch of smaller stuff as well. I play SnowRunner at the moment with the shareholders in Coatsink. It's an odd addiction. I don't know if you've ever played it. Um,
No, I haven't actually.
yeah, it's a weird one. We play Deep Rock Galactic together as well, a lot, which is a really fun game. Um, and what else we got here? Yeah, I mean, I play a fair bit of VR on my own as well, of course, a link to the job, but most VR games tend to be on the shorter side, so I get through them quite quickly. Um, I play on the VR side, I play a fair bit of Onward, which is one of the games that we publish, a milsim shooter type, kind of close to Counter Strike,
Oh,
but
okay.
in VR. It's actually our most successful VR title by a mile. I think it's one of the most successful VR titles of all time, period, actually. And
Oh, interesting.
yeah, I don't know if that's your cup of tea, but you might be interested in checking it out. Yeah,
Wh-
it's yeah. What else have we got? Oh, the big one for me over the last 4 years that I've gone back to many times has been The Witcher 3.
Mhm.
I'm a big fan of the novels. Not so much the TV show,
Oh,
but a big fan of the novels. Um, and the games, all three of them, I loved. I loved them despite their kind of Eastern European jank at the time. Especially, I'm not talking about Witcher 3 so much here, but certainly Witcher the original had
hmm hmm
some hilarious jank about it. But I love the atmosphere that they created. I thought they really did something special with it. And I think 2 was even better, and 3, of course, is masterpiece.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I was big into the Elder Scrolls for a while, but yeah, with Skyrim, kind of like a lot of people, just kind of burned out on it. I think I spent 300 hours in that game,
Oh
and
yeah.
yeah, just almost too little direction in it. Almost,
You
yeah,
kind of you kind of hit a wall, but that wall
yeah,
isn't from the game. It's more of
yeah,
you kind of create your own wall and then just one day put it down and
mhm,
you don't start it back up, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I think a lot of people can relate to that one, because that's a common thing I've read. Now there are some people that just keep powering through. Now there is two things I want to touch on that you
yeah,
mentioned. One is that you mentioned like Deep Rock Galactic and other multiplayer similar games, which are always great because as you said, you have several children, a family, in fact, just a family. I'll encompass it in that, and like those little games that you can jump in and 20 minutes you've accomplished something and then you can jump
yeah,
out, call it for a few days. That's always great. And it's always fantastic to know those games exist.
yeah,
Um, a handful of your games that I am aware of are similar in that nature. And those are, I think, as people get busier or just wanting to sit down and enjoy something that's easy to consume, and I mean no insult when I say that.
yeah,
Um, it's fantastic that those kind of things are creating a marketplace or are existing in the marketplace. I don't know
yeah,
what way is the right way to phrase that, but it's always great to see those kind of games. And the other thing I want to touch on is, as you put it, the Eastern European jank.
yeah,
Um, I'm not going to lie. I have been referring to, games like The Witcher, Gothic, um, Ryzen, games like that have a very intentional technical design,
yeah,
um, but the barrier to entry, the learning curve for it is, or not learning curve, but like the skill investment system you have to put into it. Um, I've been referring to those games as similar to what you said because it's a very different design approach that I don't think a lot of people fully realize is 100% intentional. And it's always amusing watching someone that, might not have played the original Witcher or played Gothic or, similar games sit down and suddenly go, wait, I have to push different buttons to swing the sword back and forth or what have you.
yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and it's like, well, yeah, that's the charm of it. Don't
yeah,
get beat up by that level one mud crab thing over there. Have fun. Good luck.
yeah,
Now, there is some also I do want to ask though, because you mentioned the family
mm,
with children. Now, obviously, having to play, if you are playing a lot of games or potentially playing games with them around, you have to make sure they're kid friendly.
mhm.
But do you find yourself playing games with your kids? Like, are you guys booting up Cake Bash and playing that together, or other things like that?
Yes, more and more. I mean, they're only very little, so
Okay.
the 5, 3, and 1. So there's all the eldest, my daughter, is kind of at the age now where she can grasp the controller. Like the early when I was about her age playing NES.
hmm
So she can sort of get some of the games. Yeah. She just needs a bit of help on the more complex things. But we've actually been playing one of our published titles, Fogs, together.
hmm
Just came out about 6 days ago. It's done tremendously well, actually. A physics-based platform puzzler, co-op platform puzzler, um, about a two-headed dog, like Nobi Nobi Boy style.
hmm
But yeah, we've been playing that together on Switch, and yeah, it's really really fun playing it with them. My son, the middle child, 3-year-old, he is more of a troll than anything. So he doesn't mean to be, but he will, drag, because each kid is controlling one end of the dog.
Mhm.
He'll end up dragging her off cliffs and stuff if you leave him to it. So yeah, but it's great to see. It's great that they love, like, they don't even really comprehend that the game was made by my studio.
Mhm.
So, but they pick it. They want to play that game all the time. So it's really wonderful to see that. Um, I have had them. This might make me the worst parent ever, but I have had them sit and watch me play some more adult content, like uh, God of War,
Mhm.
for example. They watch me play quite a lot of that. Most of it's fine, but there's a few bits where you're breaking the necks of giants and stuff like that, where I was like, "Oh, kids, maybe you should turn away for a minute. I think we're about to murder this thing."
Which
Um,
obviously makes them pay more attention, right?
which yeah, of course makes them. But they also they watch me play Spider-Man, Miles Morales.
Mhm.
They're big Spider-Man fans, so they love that game. They watched me play the previous Spider-Man as well. That game's mostly family friendly. Certainly not much cursing in it or anything. So I think yeah,
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there.
that's all right. I was just going to say I think yeah, we got years of gaming ahead of us, all of us.
Mhm. And in defense of Spider-Man at the very least, I think a lot of people would struggle to find an example of that game not really being something you could play in front of your kids because even if you look at some of the smaller details in it, you know there's a lot of safety set up in ways that you can go, oh no, Spider-Man just webbed that man to the building after he fell off. Like
Yeah,
it's not in a position where the violence can be without explaining or without explaining it. You can easily show that the violence is not over the top or gratuitous.
yeah.
I have no defense for God of War, mind you, but
No. God
I'm
of
not
War, you know.
I'm not one to talk myself. My father started me with Doom when I was like 6, so
Awesome.
I'm not going to ever try and argue against that because it is what it is, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I think the big problem was, I was playing God of War over a Christmas period, and
Mhm.
obviously we're taking a break from work, so I've got loads of free time, and I was obsessed with God of War. It's an incredible game, incredible game. And so I didn't want to not play it while they were awake. I didn't want to have to wait till evening. So I was just like, oh, I'll just pause this and try and shimmy them out the room when I think there's going to be a lot of violence.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, fortunately, most of the time, the creatures that you're killing in there are like golems and stuff, aren't they? So, they're rock men falling apart rather than, too much blood. But there's the odd time where you're ripping the head off of something or other, like a giant, like I said, where I
Yeah.
did have to shuffle them out quickly. Yeah.
And like you also mentioned, your two oldest playing Fog. So that is a fantastic game. I just want to make sure I say that before moving forward, if anything, or before I forget to. But yeah, no, Fogs is a fantastic game. Like you said, it's kind of like the double-sided Nobi boy, which is
Yeah.
I'm not going to lie, it's a weird sell only because
Yeah.
Nobi boy is a weird sell.
Yeah.
Um,
It is.
and I say that having bought and I believe beat it. I don't remember. It was a very surreal experience.
Yep.
Similar to Fogs, it is a very surreal experience, but in a really nice way. Like the puzzles are fun. I played the demo with my girlfriend, and we're looking forward over the holidays coming up to being able to sit down and hopefully play it through. Um, but it is a fantastic game that it's the puzzles were not overly challenging, but challenging enough that you had to sometimes take a minute and figure out, which is always fantastic because you don't feel utterly defeated, which is I
Mm.
think a problem with a lot of puzzle games is some of them push that line a little too hard, and you end up at the end of it all being more frustrated than you were relaxed or having that
Yeah.
sense of accomplishment. So
Yeah.
it's just wanted to point out before I forgot that to mention that about Fogs, that it's a great game and people should definitely check it out.
Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, no worries. So this question is going to be a little different just because it's kind of crosses a different kind of landscape. Or not, sorry, it doesn't cross it kind of crosses two different paths for you, and that's because, you guys are a developer and a publisher. So from that perspective, how do you feel about the current landscape of games fandom and interaction with fans? Um, and are there different sets of expectations as a developer versus as a publisher that you might have ran into or come across?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we've kind of at this point we feel like we've seen a pretty broad spectrum of user
Hmm.
and type of user, and because we have a broad spectrum of titles that we're involved in, obviously things from gang beasts to IP licensed products like Transformers and the upcoming Jurassic World Aftermath. Um, and then all the way to sort of hardcore games like Onward, the Milsim. So yeah, I think every audience is inherently positive. Um, I think uh, people are dumber than a person, if that makes sense. So as soon as you get a crowd of voices screaming,
Hmm.
uh, they become or making noise. They naturally appear more, uh, you know,
Toxic, if I may.
toxic, yeah, than individual people. So I think the more that we're able to engage with people on an
Hmm.
individual basis, the better. With each person on an individual basis, the better the people as a whole the users will seem and feel, and the user base will feel. So I think that's generally what we try to do. Tools like Discord are great for that.
Hmm.
Um, we have a Discord specifically for Onward, which is very very positive environment, very very busy, constantly active, because the user base is quite that. And then we have our own Discord for our own inbuilt or in-house built games and published titles for Coatsink specifically, which is very very friendly place and relatively fast growing because of course we've only launched our first 3 published titles in the last 4 months.
Hmm.
So yeah, but it seems to be a very very pleasant group of people that are playing our games. I think because our games so far are quite pleasant in themselves. So you got Fogs and Cake Bash. And you got Get Packed, which is currently Stadia only, but will be coming to other platforms. Um, they're all pretty light-hearted games and
Hmm.
relatively well built and well maintained. And we try to communicate well with our users so that they don't feel like they're getting stiffed in any way.
And yet
Yeah.
that that makes a lot of sense. Because like the what you said, is when you have a bunch of people, kind of mob mentality might kick up
Mm,
or kick in, and uh, being able to deal with people kind of as a one-on-one, that kind of has two folds really.
yeah.
Because you one, if people see you interacting one-on-one with people, it kind of makes them think maybe you'll interact with them one-on-one. But at the
Mhm,
same time, you at that point you're addressing a person, not a group, right? So that's a good mentality, I think. I want to say, phrase it as, to go with that, because yeah, like if if you're not careful, the mob runs rampant. But
mm,
addressing each person kind of makes the mob disperse, and um, everything just sort of flow a little better.
yeah.
Now, one last question for you before moving on. There Now, seeing as that Cake Bash is a party game about party snacks, interacting with each other, in some cases, dressing each other up or beating each other up, is it safe to assume that you are at least a little familiar with Mario Party?
Oh yeah.
So what kind of favorite Mario Party mini games are
Oh
are on your list?
yeah. So I'm trying to think. The last Mario Party I played must have been on Switch. Um, oh no, am I mixing up with Wario? Which the WarioWare? Yeah, WarioWare. Yeah, I may be mixing it up actually. I don't want to mix up the mini games between those two. Yeah, if I was to pick a mini game, it's been a while since I've played one. Now there was one that I really liked, a simple mini game. I can't remember if it was in Mario Party or in WarioWare, but
Mm-hmm.
there's one where there's a tilting round table
Mm-hmm.
where four players are having to balance on.
Mm-hmm.
Does that ring a bell? But I can't remember which game it was in. And then whoever falls off first,
Loses.
obviously. Yeah, I don't know though. I'm not sure which game that was in, to be honest.
That, that's a good question. I think that probably lends itself more to Mario Party because if I'm not
Yeah,
mistaken, I believe WarioWare, um, their mini games were more single person focused.
yeah,
Um,
much simpler as well. Of course,
yes, yeah, quicker.
WarioWare.
They're 30-second in and outs kind of thing.
Yeah,
Um, Now, because you mentioned, I am gonna say if you haven't played Mario like a Mario Party in a while, the Mario Party for the Switch, I personally feel that it was a good return to form.
yeah,
Um, I didn't play much after the Nintendo 64 in terms of Mario Party, just because that's how it was for me.
yeah, yeah. I
But
was the same.
they kind of lost their way from what I've read and heard, into the GameCube and the Wii U era. But the Mario Parties for the Switch, it feels very reminiscent back to the Nintendo 64 era. So if you are, ever thinking about picking one up again, I'd recommend it. It's good family fun. Not to shoehorn family in there, but it's good fun that everyone I think can reasonably enjoy and easily pick up.
Absolutely. Which one is the Switch one? Is it just called Switch or is it called Mario Party 8?
I
I'm
think it might just be Mario Party.
Okay. Oh, it's Super Mario Party. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And because Mario Kart was Mario Kart 8 on Switch. Yeah. So
Yes.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. I can't. I can't even remember which one it was that I last played, but it's somewhere in the last couple of years that I've played one.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. Probably at a Christmas party or something.
But yeah, with like a family that's getting older,
Yeah.
that might be something to look into in the future if they get tired of beating each other up as cupcakes and as donuts. That is.
Exactly. Definitely. I mean, the one that I remember the most is the N64 one. Same
Hmm.
as played. There was a weekend when I was probably around the age of 10 or something, 10 or 11, where I spent it at some family friend's house, and the four kids, of which me and my brother were two, spent the entire weekend on Mario Party for N64.
Hmm.
Yeah, whichever one that was. It must have been Mario Party 4 or something.
I think the easiest way to determine what one it might have been is if your hand had a hole in it when you were done playing. Because if that was the
Yeah,
case, it would have been one.
yeah,
And if you walked away without a massive, cut on your hand from jamming it on the joystick, it was probably two or three.
yeah. Okay.
Because Nintendo quickly realized they can't have a game that actively encourages people to um, cut their hand up on their joystick.
Yeah.
So Tom, I just want to thank you for for making time today to talk to me about your favorite games and Coatsink. Is there anything else that you guys have upcoming? You mentioned Fog is just released, but is there anything else you want to make sure people are aware of or um, talk about so that just again that people are aware of?
Besides Fogs, we've got Jurassic World Aftermath um, launching for Oculus Quest. Um, Pretty soon, people are going to hear about it. It's a survival horror game, inspired primarily by that classic scene in Jurassic Park 1 with Lex and Tim um, avoiding the velociraptors in the kitchen. That's the big
Hmm.
inspiration, but set in the Jurassic World timeline. Fits in between the movies. Uh, features characters from the movies. So yeah, I think keep an eye out for that one. It's got a really beautiful, unique art style, and I think the team have done an amazing job on it. So I think people will like it.
Yeah, definitely. And uh, it's always great to see more VR games coming out, especially survival horror ones, just because it kind of
Mhm.
gives you a different sense of agency that you might not have had uh, before. In a game that you don't have the head strapped on with the gloves. Um, and I say that strictly from a standpoint of someone who hasn't had a whole lot of experience with VR, but I imagine those kind of experiences are um, both terrifying and enjoyable. So, if
Yeah,
you're into those kind of games, I imagine this is definitely something to check out.
definitely. Yeah, I mean, I think now is the time for VR as well. It's I think if we look at it commercially, even it's pretty successful for developers at the moment to produce a VR game. Certainly on Quest, PSVR, Steam.
Hmm.
Um, we have games on Quest, for example, are outselling our most successful non VR games now. So there's definitely a growing market there. Um, and I think that the technology is in a place now where it's pretty compelling as well. The Quest is a really fantastic piece of hardware, very comfortable, with great games to play as well.
Oh, that's great to hear. I personally I've only really used the Vive um, through a friend and the PSVR only a few times. So it's always good to hear about other VR not approaches um, options, but other VR
Yeah.
options because personally. I like you kind of, I agree with what you said is now is kind of the time for it. It's hitting a point where technology wise it's getting more affordable. So
Mhm.
I think people like me and myself are always going to kind of keep an open mind to what's available that's going to offer the best bang for buck, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, again, Tom, thank you so much for joining me.
My
Uh,
pleasure.
yeah, and it was great to work all this out. I was looking forward to this conversation. Thanks again for joining me on the Red Tunic podcast, and a special thanks again to you, Tom, for making some time to have this conversation, as well as a special thanks to Ronald Jenkins for allowing me the use of his music from the title track from Road Steep. Join me next time.